Hello friends, I'm Kayla. Welcome to my best reading month of the year. I feel reinvigorated to film a wrap up because I had five stars this month, which is the most I've had in a very long time. Last month, you might remember, I had no new 5 stars. Here are all of my stats if you care about anything. I read 20 books in the month of May, and I'm going to answer some of your questions that came in on Instagram. Thank you so much for these. I'm going to pick a book that answers each of these, like most adaptable to film, most likely to read while eating breakfast, which one made you forget your everyday life, and which one made you eerily aware of it, which book had your favorite cover, which book would you read a prequel, which one had the most disappointing cover for how much you loved the book, these are so creative, which book do you think would be better on a reread, which character do you think aligns with your star sign the most, which would make for the best work book club, which had the best ending. Then you have to choose one cover to also be the cover of your autobiography. Which do you choose? So that's going to happen along here. And what's fun about this organization is there's going to be a 5-star every once in a while because Julie recommended I organize it from most blue cover to least blue cover because aesthetically speaking, I think this is my favorite stack visually that I've read the entire year. There's a lot of blue in there. There's a lot of just complimentary things. So speaking of a 5-star and the most blue cover, this is The Magician's Assistant by Ann Patchett. It's a story of this woman who just recently lost her husband. Her husband and her, she kind of had an unrequited love for decades. And he's gay and had another kind of partner and various things going on in their lives that you uncover. But towards the end of his life, he married her. She had everything left to her from him and various other situations. So she has a lot of money and not a lot of purpose. She doesn't really know what to do with life. She's left in this giant house all by herself, and all she knows is being a magician's assistant. That's what her husband did. He was a magician. She followed him everywhere, did everything that she could do in this career, supported him through starting multiple businesses, and now she's left with this giant hole in her life, and it's suddenly been filled by his family. He hasn't spoken to them in decades. And all of a sudden our main character Sabine finds herself brought into their life. They want to know more about their son. They want to tell her things about him. It's a really simple story. It doesn't do anything particularly impressive. I wouldn't even say this has like stunning writing, a wonderful plot. Like it takes place over such a short amount of time and it's just about grappling with grief, but it's not too heavy, but it's not too like wild. It's just a simple, quiet story, and for some reason, I loved it. I think the comment that I would put with this one is a book that I would most want to read with breakfast, probably because it's just simple and quiet and like a chill way to start your day, and you should also read it over multiple days because like it's just slow. So just, 20 pages with breakfast every morning I think is a good idea. Next up, we've got A Spear Cuts Through Water. There is a lot of blue on here, but also this turquoise, which is blue adjacent, so I don't know, you may argue with me if it's this one or the next one that should be next in the lineup. This is by Simon Jimenez. It's my second read from this author. And what I've decided for my wrap-ups moving forward is I'm going to give myself 3 outs a wrap-up where I don't actually like review the book. I've been getting so much feedback on how to structure my wrap-ups. So many people want me to still mention all the books that I read, but also talking about the ones that I didn't really like and I've already vlogged is really bogging me down. Trying to come up with something unique that I didn't already say in my video, especially for something that was 3 stars or under. I just don't know what to say about this. I feel like it kind of kept me at arm's length. I didn't really feel like I was brought into the story. A lot of people are telling me it was because of my audiobook experience. I'm not going to argue that. I think the audiobook was done well. Any of my confusion, like at the beginning of like certain sections or belong to certain things, some things are italicized, I think it made sense towards the end. I just never really cared about what was happening in here. Icarus is up next. Now I know this is more blue. Okay, I know this is more blue, but my rationale was this has more other colors. This is more blue and then, something near blue. This has blue and orange and yellow and pink, but this is Icarus by Kate Ancrum. I also gave this one a 3. And I think I have to answer this for the question of my autobiography. And I know that like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think it's just because I love the style of it. It's a little doodly, and then there are all of these designs like related to somebody's mind. The rest of them, I'm telling you, there's nothing else here. Absolutely nothing here that I could imagine the cover of my autobiography. But this is a really heavy, beautiful book about 2 teenage boys who are going through really difficult times in life. Icarus and Helios are very different. They create this bond in an unexpected situation because Icarus has been raised to steal precious works of art, and like him and his father replicate them, they sell them, they do a lot of illicit stuff. And when he's breaking into this house one day to steal something, there is a teenage boy there, and he can't leave his home. He is being held there. And Icarus is being controlled in his own way, in his own life, and they just create this bond and realize that there is more to life than what they're currently experiencing, and the love and belonging that they feel because of each other just changes their perspective. And Icarus, we get to see his entire life, like him going to school, the people that he knows, all of the aspects. That he's very much the main character, but it is about this journey of the two together. I also would say this for the best ending question, because like you just get to feel happy for these characters and what they've built. And so many books that I read this month have endings that I love, but very ambiguous endings, very just abrupt endings. And I don't think objectively I could say they're the best. So this one I don't feel super strongly about, but I think it is the best ending of anything that I read, maybe. Next up, lots of blue on this one, and then again some complementary colors. This is Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel. This was sent to me by the publisher, and I gave it 4 stars. It's about the goddess of the river and following her as she is that goddess, and people come into the river and asking for various things for their life, but also her in a mortal situation where there's a curse she has to try to break, and that involves finding a partner and having babies and killing. It was really similar to Kaikei thematically. We're talking about somebody with a lot of power and influence. In Kaikei, it's somebody with royalty, and they also have these compulsion type powers. And in the Goddess of the River, obviously a goddess has so much control and can help anybody, and it's about choosing how to use that power. And then also, just like Kaikei, it's a lot about motherhood and having children and them maybe being different and supporting their own paths. But the writing felt so different to me. It felt like reflective. It felt like I was reading a fairy tale. It didn't let you into the character as much, the character's mind specifically, because there was just a lot else happening in the pages and a lot of characters to remember. I enjoyed myself a lot with this one. Then we have the final super blue cover, primarily blue, but also complementary things. This is They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. This is a collection of essays about culture and music and film and entertainment, and just a good portion of this author's life experiencing different performances and commenting on them, critiquing people's perception of those performances and artists, but using all of those things to contextualize his own feelings and experiences in life with death around him, racism, joy, pain, and especially belonging and feeling like a part of something. There's something so special about going to a concert and feeling like everybody's there for the same thing, everybody's experiencing the same joy at the same time. I really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.5. It was so close to a 5, but it felt like a compilation of great authorial works as opposed to something that was intended to be an essay collection, which is how it was written. But just knowing how well something like this can be built out and like the connections between all of the essays, this didn't quite have that quality, but all of the essays independently were all a 4 or a 5. Then we've got my next 5-star. I knew this would be a 5-star. I felt so strongly about it, and I hadn't heard anybody talk about it. It was one of those random books that I heard about randomly. I put on one of those lists of like anticipated things, and I just decided based on very little that this was going to be a 5-star, and it was. The publisher sent this to me, I think, after seeing my anticipated list. It's called How to Become a Dark Lord and Die Trying by Django Wexler, and there is a significant amount of blue on here. I really want to try to pitch this well so people understand what the tone of it is going in. So it feels like a fun and stupid video game quest. It drops you into chaos right away. There is this woman who wakes up and she has no idea where she is, what she's doing, what's going on, and she just walks around and suddenly she dies. And then she wakes up and she is restarted exactly, respawned, if you will, where she woke up the last time. And every time she wakes up, She goes somewhere different, meets someone different, tries to figure out like where she is and what's going on. And she's also surrounded by things like orcs and yetis and stone eaters and something called red tooths. Characters, they're very reminiscent to me of the type that you would see in Legends and Lattes or Tress of the Emerald Sea, but this is not cozy fantasy in the way that those are. It's fun and it's so funny, but it's also like really intense and dark. And I want to be clear, it very much is evident that it's a man writing a female main character. So as she's dying and restarting over and over again, she is trying to figure out like what she's supposed to do. She feels like there is this journey that she's supposed to be on, and she keeps dying and trying to interact with these various creatures. And some of them are very friendly and some of them are very stupid and some of them are very cute. And she keeps getting like taken out by this dark lord, and she can never surpass like the level, I guess. So she decides at the point that we start the book, we learn about all of these things later, like the journey that she's been on, but we start the book at the point where she has decided, what if I try to become the Dark Lord instead of taking the Dark Lord down? All of that sounds like it could be cozy, but it has a lot of dark topics. There's sex, there's a lot of vulgarity. So many of these characters are unlikable, and I really get other people this not working for them, but it was perfect for me. And this was actually my first 5-star fantasy of 2024, which feels crazy because I'm at like 120 books. Not that I've read 120 fantasy, but I've read a lot of fantasy, and I can't believe this is my first 5-star. This is the one that I would answer the question, which one made you forget about your real life the most and just like get sucked into this other world? Also, there was a question about which book would be better upon reread, and I really stewed over this question. I was thinking about this one beforehand because as soon as it came in, I was like, which one is it? And I don't think anything here would be better upon reread, but I think this one will be the most fun to reread. Apparently it's a series, which I didn't know when I picked it up. And also, as I was approaching the end, I was like, how on earth is this going to be a series? But I will continue, and I'm gonna reread this first, which I'm sure is just gonna be so much fun. Moving along to another fantasy, a romantasy, The Emperor and the Endless Palace by Justinian Huang. This I had such a roller coaster reading experience with because I was so sure this was gonna be like a 5-star fantasy and I was gonna love it. And then as it kept approaching the time that I was supposed to read it, people kept telling me that it is different than like my expectations. There was a lot more sex in it. It was actually like an erotic book. And then when I chose it as my like smut of the month official and unofficial book club selection, people were like, no, it's not erotic, but it does have a lot of sex. So, and then as I was reading it, I was like, I don't like this. The first third, I was not into it. I feel like the way that this is written is not the way that I maybe would have preferred it, because you're following 3 different timelines. We're in 1740, 4 BCE, and then like current day? Yeah, present day. And you're following these 2 characters throughout time who are fated, and no matter what time they're in, they will find each other. They don't recognize each other, they don't really know each other, but they will always come together and have an experience. So there's one where it's like royalty, there's one where it's just like current day, people like, you know, using Grindr, talking about K-pop and watching Real Housewives and all of these things that felt so jarring when I was in this like rich, beautiful historical setting, and then it would just switch all of a sudden and it would keep going back and forth. And I felt like I would have preferred if it was, because it's so short also, if it was just the 3 stories told linearly. But then as I continued the book, I came to understand everything better and also appreciate and understand why it was written that way. And then I gave it like, it's so close to a 4. I think it's a 3.75, but that 3.75 just feels so monumental because I really, for the first third of this, thought I was going to give this like 1 or 2 stars. I was struggling. I think this has a much more niche readership than you would expect from a romantasy. I think it's more for readers who like salacious weird fiction with like messy relationships and dynamics. There is indeed a lot of sex, but it's not like titillating. It's for the reader, it's just more the journey of the characters. And because of how much there was, I almost expected there to be like some fantastical like reason because there was like 3 sex scenes back to back in all of the timelines. I was like, it should have been written that like they could suddenly remember each other, or that they had to complete like their relationship didn't officially happen like magically until they completed this act or something. I don't know. The reveals and developments were really fun to read. I was surprised by how much I ended up liking this, and I would recommend it to very specific readers. So it is an answer to the question of which one am I surprised that I liked the most, and also to the one that has the most gay energy because it is Pride Month. If you have this on your radar, pick it up. The Brides of High Hill is next by Nevo because of all the blue in the title. This is the 5th book in the Singing Hills cycle. And somebody posed the question, is this a good one that you could start in the series with or something like that? And I actually think that this is the only one that I would say you could read it's the one you could read the most independently. I wouldn't recommend it. I think you should read them in order, but this one existed so independently, it felt like to me, because it didn't really reference much else going on with Chi, our main character, who was a cleric. And the series is all about writing down stories and hearing tales, and they are responsible for keeping all of the information. But then this story so much involved Chi just in the moment, getting involved with this bride and helping her feel comfortable in the place that she's brought and with the person that she's going to marry. But then she just gets like really sucked into this whole experience, and it felt like the most gothic of everything in the series. It felt like a little twisty at the same time. There was a certain reveal I wasn't expecting. And I think for most people, this is gonna end up being like their favorite or their least favorite of the series. For me, I gave it a 4. I had a really good time. I've given most books in this series a 4, and I will continue, which is exciting. Another one with a little bit of blue in the title is The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This is my next 5, and I think this is so interesting to see everybody's reviews for and impressions of, because it's pretty universally accepted that this is too long and it's too repetitive. So I don't know how to set your expectations in the right way, except to say this is probably going to be a 3 or 4 star for you. I haven't seen that many people hate it. I haven't seen that many 5 stars. For me, it was perfect because I also love a book that really hammers home a point. So the repetitiveness worked for me. I loved it. I was hooked the absolute entire time. Somebody asked me if I would recommend the physical or audio. I did experience it both ways, and I think they're both good. The audiobook is well done, so if you have access to it, grab it. It's about this woman. I think the reason I thought when I read this, I thought everyone was going to be obsessed with it. I thought everyone is going to love it. It's like a book of the month pick. It was a Jenna's book club pick. And then I gave it 5 stars. I was like, this is it. This is the book of the year. But now everybody is just like kind of okay with it, which I get. But you have this main character who comes home one day and walks into her house, and there's a man there, and apparently it's her husband. There's pictures of them all over the wall together. He's in her phone. They've been chatting. She can look through a history of their texts and photos for years, but she doesn't know who he is. And then he has to go up into the attic and grab something, and when he comes back down, it's not him. It's a different man who also is completely comfortable in the house and is like, I'm your husband. And all of a sudden, the pictures in the house reflect this guy, and he's in her contacts list as her husband, and everybody around her knows this man to be her husband. And so she learns that she can send men up into the attic, and they will disappear forever, and she'll never see them again. And throughout the story, she's like, first, for I don't know, the first half, she's trying to figure out what the heck is happening, if she can control it, what's going on. If she tells somebody, will they remember that conversation for when the next husband comes? She doesn't know if she goes into the attic, if she will transport somewhere. So there's a lot of repeating moments of her going through the same thing with the same, not the same man, different men. And then I feel like the second half is more experiencing longer relationships with a couple people as she's deciding, does she want to stick with them? But then she also just kind of accepts her fate and has more fun with it. I can agree that it's it's too long and it's repetitive, but at the same time, if I actually imagined this book 100 pages less and ending quicker, I don't think that you would fully get in her mind and understand like why she made certain decisions at the end. Like, you have to experience the hundreds of husbands that come and why she makes certain choices by the end. Somebody asked which is the most adaptable, and I think it's this. And I really wonder what they would do in the movie, because I feel like if this was turned into a film, it would be more extreme. It would have to be more extreme. Like, she would end up with, I don't know, royalty or somebody famous or like a really terrible man, and it would just be this more extreme story. But because of the way it's explained to us, each of these like timelines, versions of her reality or like piece of the multiverse, they're all places she could actually have ended up. So she finds out who she's married to, and it's like many men that she's already met, she's already dated. So they're like actual scenarios she could have ended up in, not just like any person in the entire world shows up. It's like realistic scenarios. I think I especially loved this because it didn't try to drive home this really intense message. It didn't get really heavy. It didn't get really emotional. It was just a fun time, but it also wasn't like over the top, silly and goofy. There was like grounded moments. And I just think it was such a fun concept that also stuck the landing for me personally. This is probably one that I would recommend the most as a book club pick. I don't know specifically for a work book club, but I think there's so many opportunities to talk about like what you would do in these scenarios. So that's the one that I would recommend most, I think. Then we've got Spin a Black Yarn by Josh Malerman, which is my next choice for a book that I'm not actually going to review because I don't really remember it. There are a couple novellas in here. They're weird and speculative a little bit, I think. I don't remember them. I remember one where there's a husband and wife and they're both like bad people and they get stuck in their house. They get trapped by this machine, like this cleaning machine, and that one was really fun. The rest of them I've completely forgotten at this point. Oh, and there was a little bit of blue in one of the threads. And then this one next, a little bit of blue as the author's name, In the Miso Soup by Rayu Murakami. This is a very interesting story that I would say is one that could get you out of a reading slump. There are multiple here that I think could work for me getting out of a reading slump, but this is the shortest one and it's very captivating. Not necessarily in a good way. I think like you might hate this, but you also might love it. And either way, it's a fast read that you can just finish and go, what was that? I gave it a 4. It's a strangely paced, I gave this a 3. Strangely paced Japanese thriller about a kind of tour guide who brings people around to different areas, and he's doing one for an American tourist who has a lot of money and who's hired him for multiple days, and he wants to have certain sexual experiences. Our main character, Kenji, starts to be suspicious of him, thinks that he may be a bad person, but is also realizing he could be in danger himself because he knows his full name, he knows where he lives, he knows things about him that make it not safe for him to just escape. So he commits to the 3-day experience even though things are going wrong. He's witnessing horrific things. This is a very brutal, jarring book, violence and sex-wise. And I just thought captivating. It was a captivating time. And now we have no more blue. So what's adjacent to blue? Green. This is a dangerous collaboration, the 4th book in the Veronica Speedwell series by Deanna Raybourn. Somebody asked which character I think I would most associate with my star sign. And none of these, like not a single character here came to mind, but I kept picking up this book and going, is it Veronica? I feel connected to Veronica. I feel like a lot of things that Veronica does and feels, I connect to, I relate to, but we're also so different in so many ways. And then I was like, you know what it is? I'm a little bit Stoker. Real life, real me, a little bit Stoker. So that's gonna be my answer. Don't know if it's correct, but that's what I'm that's what I'm saying in this moment. This series is Victorian. We have a naturalist and an adventuress who in each book get pulled into a mystery where somebody wants them to help solve something for some reason. And along the way, they are falling in love. This is their love story. They are like perfect partners for solving these mysteries. They are such close friends. They started out not liking each other. They are so different. And they also have a hard time admitting their own feelings to themselves and each other. They also have so much in their past that makes them complicated and messy for one another. But that's what we're all reading the series for. It's for the times when they almost kiss. It's when they touch hands. It's when they have to profess that they care for each other because they got into a life or death situation. I gave it a 4.5 and I will not give out a 5 until they get it on. One of the books in the series, they will. Nobody tell me when. I'll find out for myself and then you'll know because I'll come to my wrap up and say, I gave this Veronica Speedwell a 5. Next up, this one, a little bit of green here. This is Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics by Marc, Lamont, Hill, and Mitchell Plitnick. I read a book really similar to this, but specifically about Canada's relationship with Israel and Palestine a couple months ago. And this one is about the US's relationship with Israel and Palestine. It is not a history of Palestine. This is not something I would recommend to anybody starting to get an understanding of anything, but it's about various presidents. It goes through a good chunk of time and how different policies have changed dependent on who is in power. It talks about Israel's escalating authoritarianism, how US policy has enabled it, and how it has affected occupation, the Seas of Gaza, and the diminishing US funds for Palestinian relief. It really critiques American, especially like self-identified progressive Americans on their silence regarding this, and very thoroughly and repetitively challenges the notion that Jewish self-determination must mean Palestinian dispossession. It was very well written, very well organized, by no means a beginner kind of experience. There were things that went over my head. There was lots to learn in here though. I think somebody asked if I had to choose 3 books to write book reports on, what I would pick. This would be one of them, just because I think it's easiest to write book reports on nonfiction. But then my other 2 answers would be Nothing But the Rain, which we'll talk about in a second, and probably Ripe, because the symbolism in those 2 I think would make for the easiest book report. So I guess like I want to move on to this, but I want to move on to this because this has a little bit of like, that is kind of green, but this one is purple, and purple is just as close to blue as green. So let's do Nothing But the Rain, just because I mentioned it, by Naomi Salman. This was a 4-star for me. I can't remember if I mentioned. This was a 4-star for me. And it's about a woman named laverne who is losing her memories every time she encounters rain, as is everybody in her town. And people are talking about, like, is this something that is planned by people? Like, are we being held captive here? People are trying to leave the neighborhood. They're considering themselves like rebels. They're challenging what they're being told to do, which is like stay indoors, don't go outside, it's unsafe. But also the outside world is not very well explored. Obviously this is very short, it's just kind of a concept, but there's this idea that well, it's not a question of if the rain is actually doing it. It's just sometimes when Laverne is having memory issues, you get to question, is it because she's getting old or is it because of the rain? And she's keeping a journal, but she has to remember to keep her journal. And it's just her struggling and having these obsessive thoughts. It was so interesting. It's like a perfect mix between the vibes of We Spread and Death in Her Hands. I think if you liked both of those, you have to like both of those, then you would like this one. Then we've got Girls in Love by Jacqueline Wilson, which is just about 3 girls in high school, written in the 90s, and them getting boyfriends for the first time and realizing how important their friendship and their connection is. I don't need to review it much further. I didn't rate it because it's more of like a middle grade kind of story. And so this is my answer for which one has the most simple writing style, because it has to appeal to the youth. And then I think the second part of that question was which has the most, I think it was beautiful writing style, which I would say like it's not particularly purple or poetic, but The Haunting of Velkwood, which I'll talk about in 1 second, had my favorite writing. The most things that I wanted to highlight so badly. I have a library book. Quotes that I remember that really had an impact. I'll actually get to talk about that one very quickly because Out is the 3rd book that I don't want to review. It's another one that I gave 3 stars and I just don't have very many feelings about. It's about a woman who kills her husband and a bunch of women at her work end up helping her cover it up. I liked some of this book, and then the ending, I think kind of certain moments it went back on, I think, the intent of the book. I understand why people like it. Somebody asked what I thought of the ending. I really disliked it. I'm sure there's a reason for it. If I got to write a book report, maybe I could dive into that, but not today. Now, let's talk about another 5-star. The Haunting of Velkwood by Gwendolyn Kiste. This is a very quiet, slow, sad story of this supernatural bubble around a neighborhood. And there are 3 women who 20 years ago escaped this neighborhood before it got stuck in time or whatever is happening. Nobody can enter except these 3. And people had become enamored with this as if it's like a haunted house kind of situation. There's like scientists, there's journalists who are obsessed with it, who park themselves outside of it to see if anybody can get in. They want to convince the girls to go back in. And one of them, our main character, Talitha, decides she will return. And it's about her seeing if she can convince the other girls to come back. It's all about them confronting the trauma that they've experienced. It's seeing where their friendships land. It's seeing what the people in the neighborhood who are essentially ghosts and trapped are up to, if they can help them. It's weird and it's sad and it's sapphic and it's just lovely. Somebody asked a question that was like, what's a book cover that you don't love as much as you loved the book, or something like that? And I think this is my answer, just because it's kind of generic. This book doesn't like give anything really powerful, and for me it was such a powerful story that the cover does represent it, but not my feelings being a 5-star. And then someone else asked if there's any books that I know will be in my favorites of the year, and 5 months into the year, this is the only book, not just of the month, but the only book that I am confident will be in my top 10 of 2024. And of course, we are at the point where there is no blue on any of these covers. This one was my book club pick of the month for the Literally Dead book club, so there is an entire live show around it, so I'll get through it quickly. Sisters of the Lost Nation by Nick Medina is about a girl who has recently lost her sister. She is missing, and a lot of girls seem to be missing from their reservation. People are not taking it as seriously as she would like them to, and we're following a couple different timelines before her sister went missing and after. They're working in housekeeping, and there is a certain area in the hotel essentially that girls are being brought in, and she thinks something bad is happening. I ended up giving this a 3-star. It was great conceptually, I think good writing, I think intentional topics. Murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls is an epidemic that needs to be highlighted, that needs to be talked about, that needs to be taken more seriously, and that is what the book is doing. But as far as like a mystery, it was not mysterious. As far as horror, absolutely off page. It's a horrifying experience. I like the message, but how everything was actually done as far as the supernatural and the mystery just was not my favorite. But at the same time, there was so much mystery and supernatural ideas that I couldn't just recommend this as, you know, general fiction if you want to read something about a really important and heavy topic. So yes, I find it to be mismarketed in a way, but also I just think the book is trying to do a lot of things in too few pages, maybe. Somebody asked what book I would read a prequel to, and it's this one. There are so many different characters in here. There's one specific woman, Miss Shelby, who's like telling stories, and I would love to read her story. There actually, another one of Nick Medina's books is like not a sequel, as it were, but exists in the same place and with the same characters, some who are side characters in here. So I wonder if it could be expanded into this like whole book series, and I would read more. Then we've got My Soul to Keep by Tananarive. This is the one for the question, a book cover that matches your outfit that you're filming in the best, I think, because it's just red. So is that one though, but we'll hold that up and we'll see. This is a story of an immortal, and we're getting a lot of his history, but also his current day situation. He is a husband and a father, and he can't let his family in on the fact that he is an immortal. He has to keep this secret, and things come to a head. They get really dangerous. He has to make certain decisions, trying to figure out how much he can share, because he's with the love of his life. He has his perfect life, but there's so much he's keeping from them, and he just has to make a lot of really dark decisions as the book continues. It was kind of a slow start, and then a lot was happening, a lot I was not expecting. It got very dark, and much like with the Dark Lord book, the closer I got to the end, I kept thinking, how is this a series? Like, how is this gonna wrap up in a way that is both satisfying but also a cliffhanger for the next? And then it did end up like certain things happened, and I gave it a 4. Something about Tananarive is she is going to give you every character's backstory and motivations. It doesn't matter if you like them or you dislike them, or they're a side character or a main character. She just has such an idea of cast and building these real people that we spend so much time just learning about people and being in the head of this man. And I will never not appreciate her writing. Even though things feel so slow sometimes, I will always appreciate them by the end. And then lastly, we do have my final 5-star of the month. Somebody left a question, why was Ripe not a 5-star? And I'm not sure why they asked why it wasn't a 5-star, because I never said anywhere it wasn't a 5-star. Maybe they assumed it wasn't a 5-star. I can't figure it out, but it was. It was indeed a 5. And this is one of the most exhausting books. Not the reading experience. No, yeah, the reading experience. I don't know how to explain it. I read it so quickly, but also it was trying. I would absolutely never reread this. It was exhausting in the way that, especially if you are an office girly, like a marketing or advertising person who sits at a desk and does computer stuff, and every single thing is treated like it's going to save lives or end lives, even though you're just working in marketing. I think you'll really relate to this. Everything that pops up onto your calendar is like an emergency. Every task, every interaction is like top priority all the time, and everyone around you is so high stress all the time and dedicating their entire lives to this job, when you recognize that you're just like a pawn in this big corporate world. You'll be able to relate to this, but it's also like a satirical version of that. It is to the extreme. This woman is exhausted and everything coming at her is so overwhelming. And it's not just her career and having to be like on 24 hours a day, but she also, you know, her boyfriend has a girlfriend, and her rent is going up $1,000, and her parents are unpleasant, to put it mildly. And there is this physical manifestation of her exhaustion following her around in the form of like a black hole that only she can see. She's constantly referencing this black hole that's following her. And now she suddenly has all of these new responsibilities at work, but isn't like getting paid more, isn't being taken more seriously. Just things are stacked up on her so much. She's such an unlikable character at the same time too. Like, she's constantly doing drugs. She's self-obsessed. She's choosing to be miserable in a lot of ways. Her dialogue is really grating, and one of the biggest like symbolisms of it is fruit and ripeness and the idea of fertility and pregnancy and this looming responsibility and expectation. It was so good for me, and I don't think it'll land for everyone, but it's kind of a mix of Severance and Woman Eating and Luster and House of Cotton, if that helps you figure out if you should read it. I don't know. It was a lot. And it is the one answering the question that makes you the most aware of life. And also, it's my favorite cover of the month. I love it. The pomegranate, it's so beautiful. It does kind of match. But yeah, that's that. So those are the 20 things that I read in the month of May. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you're gonna read any of these, or if you already have, what your thoughts were, and I'll see you in another video soon. Bye!